What's going on, guys? Maddie here from We Came From the Future podcast. In this episode, I'll be interviewing big time studios, so Ari and Thor, who are building a platform and a game. A lot of things to dive deep into. They've kind of blown up on social media. So, what the game is about, how blockchain kind of integrates with this whole process, and what they're going to be in the coming years, what they have in store in the coming weeks, and all that sort of good stuff. So, in full disclosure, that I and my fund are investors into the equity side of things on Big Time Studio. So we personally are very excited to see what happens with Big Time Studio and just the gaming market as a whole when blockchain kind of gets introduced and NFTs and all that good stuff. So enjoy yourself. Please share this on your socials and all of that. I will continue to be adding more videos on the podcast as soon as I can kind of get set up and in the flow of things. So enjoy the podcast and have fun. Hey guys, Matt here from We Came From the Future podcast, where we interview people that are founders, artists, people that are kind of doing cool things in the NFT space. And this time I'm honored to have Ari and Thor join us from Big Time Studio. How are you guys?
Good.
Hey, Matty. Great to have you. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Not a problem. Not a problem. You guys have seen some social media attention recently, and definitely people in my circles are asking me about Big Time Studio and what's happening there. So this is, I'm very excited to get this going, but I think we can start a little bit about your background, guys. So Thor, a little bit about yourself, how you came to this space and what you've done.
Sure. I've been in the video game industry for over 25 years now. Started off in the massively multiplayer space, and then in the social gaming boom, and then got into crypto right around crypto winter in 2018. I had a startup I was trying to get off the ground when things were no longer getting funded. That's when the co-founder of Zynga introduced me to Ari and TB Esteban from Decentraland. And then we started working together there to launch that product.
Nice. I assume you're a gamer yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially StarCraft's probably the best game ever made.
I play Warcraft.
Yeah, that one's up there too.
Nice, nice. And Ari yourself?
Sure. So I was previously the co-founder and project lead at Decentraland, where we created one of the first projects that combined gaming and NFTs. As part of that, I got to see the space developed back from when there was basically no one working on NFTs. And I would say I had a bit of an active role early on in developing the space at a community level as the organizer of Nifty, which I think was one of the first global events centered around blockchain gaming and NFTs. It was a conference that took place in Hong Kong in 2018 with about 100 people attending. I think that was the pivotal point where I realized that this was going to eventually become a huge category within the crypto industry.
Nice.
So after launching Decentraland about a year ago, we put together a decentralization plan that we had been working on for quite a while that basically included decentralizing all the infrastructure and now everything that, all the content serving in Decentraland and the communications, they all worked in a distributed manner. And we put together a private foundation and the DAO, and that allowed us, my co-founder and I, to gradually transition to an advisory role. And that's when Thor and I started working on this new venture called Big Time Studios.
Mm-hmm. I think the beauty of people being in the space for the last 3 years is that we were able to watch the space evolve. We saw what people were interested in and what they weren't interested in, the sort of features of projects that made them do well. So yeah, I think it's cool to because we were some of us were founders and investors. There's a lot of learning to be done in the last 3 years. I would love to dive a little bit deeper into Big Time Studios. So Ari, you can tell us about what Big Time Studios is and how it kind of plays into gaming and blockchain.
Sure. So the idea from Big Time Studios was conceived with Thor, as we saw the amount of excitement that players had when they were able to actually own their virtual goods. When you think about it, the video game industry these days is mostly driven by a small set of users that are buying virtual goods. And what we learned with the early blockchain games was that, comparatively speaking, people were a lot more willing to acquire assets. And of course, this is just an intuition, but we think that that's the case because they finally have a lot more control over the assets, and they finally moved away from a rental model to a true ownership model. As we developed Decentraland and saw the entire space get off the ground, we saw what were the good things going on for blockchain games, and also what were the things that users were struggling with, what were the challenges that were preventing projects to reach a more mass market audience. So we basically conceived this project as a way to help video game developers to introduce blockchain-based virtual items or NFTs into their games in a way that players could access these assets without needing to be crypto savvy. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, we're trying to become a platform to help third-party game studios to introduce NFTs. That means helping them with the minting, the custody, the payment side, compliance, and trading, among other things. Mm-hmm. But having seen quite a few companies tackle this problem, we realized that we couldn't become a platform from day one. And instead, we had to crack the content problem and create a video game that other studios could look up to. Because if you take a look at the space, well, some games are definitely growing, particularly in the past few months. But when you talk to video game studios, there's no clear success case that they can look up to and see, okay, that's a quality blockchain game, and that's something that we would like to emulate. So our strategy early on is really about creating that first quality game that we can use as a showcase and have that game reach a level of adoption that hasn't been seen before in this space, and also have that game be the one that materializes some of that thesis about how gamers spend when they are given the option to own the assets, and how NFTs monetize differently than traditional virtual goods.
Mm-hmm. So basically, sorry, Thor.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think NFTs are a great match for free-to-play games. Mm-hmm. But the challenge there is we needed to knock down all the barriers to entry that were really prevalent in crypto gaming in the first generation. And so that's largely what we're working at, so that we can have a broad reach of users and bring them in.
I think we've seen some glimpses of how big this market can become, because obviously when Nifty Gateway were able to, make a sort of a system where it was easy to purchase NFTs or art, suddenly, the platform blew up, right? When NBA Top Shot or Dapper Labs were able to build this kind of a UX experience that merged crypto and NFTs and blockchain with the front end product, which is a collectible. I think it hit like hundreds of millions or maybe even $1 billion worth of trade volume. So the market is huge if we can get it right, and the challenges are there. And if we can iron out those kinks, it makes a lot of sense, and the kind of growth is huge. It's almost never seen before.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up those examples. Dapper Labs, for example, is a project that it's a company that started working on CryptoKitties around the same time that Decentraland was getting started, and they probably went through a similar set of challenges that we did, and they experienced the high barrier to entry that the full decentralized stack presented to users, what Ethereum, like how Ethereum also prevented further adoption, and following their product releases, we saw them releasing a hybrid wallet that was part self-custodial, part in custody by the developing company, and that didn't quite work out. And then they moved to a fully custodial model, which I don't think is the only way to go about it. But for the time being, while a better UX is being developed for non-custodial solutions, that has proven to be a way that can help us bridge beyond the more typical crypto people into a much larger market. So it's an approach similar to the one that we're putting together for Big Time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many hurdles, and again, watching these projects come out and solve them over the last 2-3 years has been quite interesting, because you know, for us nerds that are used to crypto and blockchain and can handle like MetaMask pop-ups and stuff, we can get through that and do it. That's fine. But if you want to go to the masses, they need really simple solutions, right?
Yeah. One thing is what you mentioned, the user experience hurdle. Another important problem is how would you manage customer support when you're dealing with 1 million+ users and they are all expected to safeguard their own assets. And if they misplace their private key, they're pretty much on their own. So there are several examples at Decentraland where we dealt with that problem, and people had put hundreds or thousands of dollars into NFTs, virtual land, wearables, and then they expected the development company to do something about the fact that they had lost access to all those assets. So I think until someone finds better solutions for those problems, a fully custodial approach might be an easier way to scale to a larger set of users.
And then you get all those scam accounts that try and support, but then message everyone in Discord and you know, try and get those private keys. So yeah, there's so many things, and for me, it's just exciting watching the space develop and fixing these things and seeing how we get to the next level and the next level, the next phase of the NFT space. But I'd love to touch a little bit about the traditional gaming market, Thor. If you could let us know a bit of the insight as to the culture of, you know, traditional gamers. Obviously, playing the game is one thing, but then there's some MMO projects that, you know, people go into and, you know, display themselves a certain way. They have a certain skin. They like to. We've seen people buy punks and certain NFTs and put them as their display pictures, and I feel like there's a lot of I guess flexing culture, or just being, or the culture of being part of a community, or whatever that may be. And I'd love to, Thor, if you could just dive a little bit deep into that and speak about how that works and how that may tie into NFTs.
Yeah, there's a huge affinity between NFTs and virtual goods. And we pioneered a lot of this in Decentraland, both with the virtual real estate that Ari had going on, and then later what we did with wearables, and even the sale of names. That was a big surprise for us, that people were really into that. So that was really cool, being able to own your own identity on the blockchain. The idea that you could, you know, I could register Thor and I could take it from one game to another game to another game, and no one else could have it. And the same thing goes with, you know, your appearance and your customization, your ability to set yourself apart, stand out from the crowd online. That's always going to be true. And I think NFTs is a great way to make it so that players can start building equity online, where they can take their appearance and their identity from one game to another one eventually. So we're pioneering a lot of ways right now to make that possible.
Do you find there is frustrations for gamers that feel or realize that they don't own their own assets? Does that sort of a thing exist in?
Oh yeah, especially in MMO space, right? A lot of these MMOs eventually get sunset for one reason or another. The company that owns them decides they're not profitable anymore. and then they shut them down without regard to the community, right? So we've seen that cycle many times, and it's terrible, right? Because not only are the players losing all of their virtual goods, but they also have virtual relationships in those worlds. For various reasons, they don't want to be known by the real world identity. And then when that virtual world gets shut down, they lose access to their friends. But those, even though they're virtual friendships, they're just as real as any other friendship that you have. So the blockchain comes along and it allows us to factor out a lot of those things that live in central database onto the chain, and then provide ways for people to stay in touch, both to their virtual assets, but also to their virtual identity and their friends. So we think blockchain is really going to shake things up, because once you've had a taste of blockchain gaming, you're not going to want to go back to a walled garden experience.
Yeah, especially with what, everything you can do in the blockchain or a gaming space now. If you integrate NFTs, has value, right? The way you grow as a character, the XP you own could be a token, the wearables that you have. And the cool thing about NFTs, I feel, is the whole interoperability component. If some other platform comes up and says, hey, in our game, if you have, a very common item in game A, in our game, that common item is like a legendary and it gives you some special access, and someone can go off and build that. So I think the dynamics of what a compounding experience or value can be for some traditional NFTs. And I don't think we've seen much of this. But basically, maybe some really rich punk owners can build like a massive game universe and then give value to all punks that have black hair. So it's interesting that the dynamic is not just built in by one central party, that it can go on to do all sorts of things. And I think that there's so many things to explore in the NFT space.
Yeah.
Really to that point, go ahead.
The really cool thing we saw in the early days with CryptoKitties, right, was where somebody outside of Dapper made CryptoKitty Racing, where you could take your CryptoKitty out of their game without any connection to them, any permission from them. That's really the use case of the future right there. So that's a very small example.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of how those use cases come to light, I think what we are experiencing initially is realizing the value of the virtual goods as financial assets. So this is an easier problem because it doesn't require coordination between game publishers or game developers, where basically the items can be taken out of the game. You can take them to your wallet for cold storage. You can take them to a third-party marketplace, auction them. Maybe more interestingly, you can borrow the asset. You can use it as collateral to get a loan. You can fractionalize it and sell it into parts. So these are things that are already happening and that I think are going to be the main use cases for NFTs outside of the game in the next couple of years. But over time, once the infrastructure is laid out and there's more adoption, I think that's when we're going to start seeing more game studios doing, at least for a co-marketing purpose, enabling more deeper interoperability of the virtual assets across games. Like a simple way to think about it is if you're a publishing house and you own the IP of several games, you may want to use the assets in game A to incentivize users to move and try out game B. Yeah, but I think we're still like a couple of years away from seeing that kind of adoption. Like when we talk to game studios, I mean, particularly in 2021, it looks like every single gaming company is looking into NFTs, but they're still at the early R&D stage.
So one realization for me with Decentraland was that development takes time. I was a new investor, so I think a lot of people's realization was with games in generally, right? Whether it be Axie Infinity, Decentraland, or whatever it was at the time, and even the Sandbox right now that has been running a pre-sale for I think 2 years, that development takes time. So if you were to say people or games are looking into NFTs right now and the R&D part of things, even if they were to incorporate that sort of a thing, is it right to assume that it will still take if they were to decide, all right, we are going to integrate NFTs to our game, would you think it'll still take like 1, 2, 3 years for that sort of thing to reach like a momentum?
Yeah, certainly. Like if you think about companies that have healthy businesses and they have been operating for decades, they're probably not going to be the first people trying out this exciting new technology. They're going to be analyzing it internally and waiting for a crypto native company to create quality content and make a business case for the use of NFTs before they even think about bringing their IP to the space. Or they may get involved in simpler ways, such as tokenizing IP and selling it on a marketplace. That's why this initial wave of traction that we saw this year was more about digital art and collectibles rather than creating an entire game that had NFTs. Because creating a game takes 2 to 3 years, and tokenizing IP, you could do it over a weekend.
Yeah. I think, yeah, totally. That's why the art space boomed, is because the platform itself is quite simple. Just upload, some images or GIFs or your art, and then you just put it for sale. It's just like putting an item on eBay. And because structurally it did well, and art, because people were happy to spend, $10, $20, $30, maybe $50 in gas fees to acquire art that was potentially worth the thousands, it made sense. And that why I think it was like the perfect storm for the art market to do well in that period. Yeah. There's so much to talk about with interoperability and compounding benefits for NFTs. I remember when I was investing in Nifty Gateway and purchasing art, and the weekend came up and he did his drop. For me, I was buying tickets to something that he's going to come and do in the future, because I feel like once you drop these NFTs into the wild, that's a user base for you. And as the industry continues to know more, they can come back 3 years down the line and say, hey, if you own a weekend NFT in our club that we're building in Decentraland or some virtual space or whatever they're doing, integrating blockchain, you can do some special thing. So I think it's very exciting to see what's going to happen from creators and how they're going to add benefit to their collector base or user base.
Totally.
You mentioned game studios and their response to the NFT space and gaming. Is it big? Like, do they feel like this is definitely the future, or is it more kind of, oh yeah, it's this thing that might come and go? What's the mindset?
I've spoken to companies, small and large, and in the gaming space.
Basically, I want to know if Pokemon will be NFTs soon.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but like companies that could be as big as 30 billion plus that are actively developing something about NFTs. The thing is, with these large established companies, where the majority of the revenue comes from the one thing that made them huge, is they could have a small team working on this, and you don't know if this is a project that is going to come to fruition and see and actually come to market. But for sure, it seems that everyone in the gaming space is taking a close look at NFTs and getting ready so that if NFTs become like a core component of gaming, they will have the in-house expertise to act on it. I mean, we've also seen companies make announcements like GameStop, for example. But again, like, you can never know what the end product is going to be.
What do you guys think about Ethereum gas fees? I think you had your own in-house solution for that sort of a thing. Obviously, it's like the biggest issue in some spaces right now. Do you have your own kind of solution for that, or are you plugging into something that already exists?
So the way we went about it was creating a solution that, I mean, considering who our users are, we can think of them as traditional video game players. And we tried to create a solution that gave them the best user experience possible. There are a lot of ways to tackle scalability. One project, for example, that is getting super popular and which I advised early on was Matic. Like, we are seeing a lot of the DeFi projects moving on to Matic. Even Decentraland has transitioned to a large extent to Matic. But using Matic in its more traditional sense still has the expectation that players will set up a wallet and execute transactions themselves and will be the custodians of their assets. Those are some aspects of the relationship between players and virtual assets that we wanted to get rid of. We wanted to create an experience that perhaps was that would resemble Coinbase more than OpenSea, to give you an example, meaning where people had to put in as little effort as possible, and they will still get the benefits of owning scarce virtual assets that are transferable by design and whose provenance you can track. So those are, we think, the main value propositions of NFTs that we wanted to maintain. You may argue that if you're not you're the custodian of your own assets, it's not really crypto, but I think most players are not really going to share that belief. And when you take a close look at how the blockchain space works, most people that actually hold those beliefs actually still have accounts on Coinbase, Binance, and are using Coinbase custody, to give you an example. So we really wanted to build a solution that would allow us to make the game as accessible as possible with as little onboarding needed as possible. And we're coming from working on the far end of the decentralized spectrum, meaning we've seen a lot of users struggle with the wallet setup, with creating a private key, with losing the private key, with losing all their money, with being priced out of gas fees. So the solution that we created really addresses all those problems in such a way that the underlying technology is really invisible to them. Of course, there is a trust component here where we're asking people to trust us because we're going to be minting the assets in a somewhat centralized way. But the good thing about the system that we've set up is that it can be challenged at any time. People still have visibility into the supply of the assets. They can take them to their cold wallets at any time, and they can take them outside of the platform as they wish.
Nice. Interesting to see how that plays out. Thought I just remembered the question, but basically, the traditional game market is doing quite well. I'm assuming there's monetization models that are quite, lucrative, and obviously some billion-dollar games out there. Do they kind of see NFTs as potentially being a threat to those kind of systems?
They tend not to until it's too late, right? So if we look at either the MMO, right, the shift to subscription model, or an even better model was the shift to free to play, right, which pretty much devoured a large chunk of the old packaged good business. In the early days of that, right, everybody was making so much money off packaged goods, they thought, oh, no, that'll never work in North America. That only works in South Korea or whatnot, until it didn't, right? And then it was, oh, well, that only works on Facebook. And then mobile came along. And then Fortnite came along, and League of Legends came along. And now all of a sudden you had billion-dollar franchises that were free to play. So I don't believe it until they believe it, but that's just human nature. But that creates opportunity for entrepreneurial people, right, who can see the vision of the future and go make it happen.
Absolutely.
I think from a model standpoint, NFTs change the way things work a bit. On the one hand, the data that we have on the Ethereum blockchain shows that users are on average spending a lot more on virtual goods compared to traditional free-to-play games. So in that sense, the game developer may be able to get people to spend more. At the same time, because the assets are transferable by design and you're going to have all sorts of markets for these assets, the model where the game operator is the only person or the only entity selling the goods is going to change, and people are going to start buying from each other. So it's going to go both ways. But I think it's going to be beneficial not only for players, but also for game developers if they're willing to accept a new business model. At the same time, secondary markets have been frowned upon traditionally because it's hard for game creators to really know like what's going on out there in the secondary market. But what the digital art space has shown is that artists are super happy because they can finally see like what's happening in the secondary market and get royalties from all those secondary transactions. So, I mean, we're hopeful that this is going to be value additive, not only to players, but also to game developers.
All right. Interesting. All right. I'd love to kind of jump into the NFT drop that's coming up. I think you guys have, the first sort of investable or game related items that the community can purchase and be involved with. So what do you have planned? I'd love to know more.
Sure. So we have a couple of sales coming up. The idea behind this was really to get to know our community better and to make an opportunity for early supporters to get first edition memorabilia, and also to purchase early access passes for the game. So on the memorabilia side of things, it could be thought of it as something similar to what's been happening in the digital art space, where people are buying basically the IP of the content creator. And the way this should evolve is that in the future, the game gets very popular. Those are going to be highly coveted pieces of art. Separately, we're going to be making available early access passes, which are also something that is not new in the sense that games have always been selling these early access passes to people that are willing to be part of the game early on. But the new thing about them in this case is that because this game is going to have a play to earn component where players are going to be getting the chance to earn wearable and cosmetic NFTs inside of the game as they complete levels. If you are a user that gets into the game before others, you're also going to have an increased chance to get your hands on limited edition assets.
That makes a lot of sense. Can't wait for that. Is there a date or a timeline as to when?
So actually today we announced our event with Binance. It should be happening towards the end of the second week of July. Binance is launching their NFT marketplace about 10 days from now, and 2-3 weeks from that date, our NFT should be going live.
Very interesting.
So we wanted to be very open and not be tribal about what blockchain we're going to be on. For us, really, what's most important is to find our audience and get users to learn about us, because this is a new brand that we're starting from scratch. But so far, we had a great reception. We announced the company exactly a month ago, and we've already seen the Discord grow all the way from 1,000 people to 31,000 in this very short amount of time. And we got about 70,000 people who signed up to our mailing list.
Wow.
So it's really exciting, and the reception that we're seeing out there is really insane.
Awesome. Well, guys, can't wait to see the project out live and to see the NFT drops and see what comes out of it. Thank you for jumping on and telling us all about Big Time Studio.
Thanks a lot, Matty. It was great to be here. Let's continue the conversation another time.
Great to meet you, Matty.
You too, Thor. All right, guys, take care.